Hi, I'm Amber, and today I will be sharing with you my weekly roundup for the last week of April. This week I was able to finish two books. The first book being The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I gave this one away, so I do not have it anymore. But it's about Theo, who at the age of 13 loses his mother and ends up kind of floating around. He stays with the Barbers, and then he ends up with his absent father, and he is kind of obsessed with this painting, which leads him into the art underground world. As you may have guessed from the fact that I did give this book away, I wasn't the hugest fan of it. The writing style really bothered me. It was very tedious to get through. She kept throwing all these parentheses and just kind of throwing all these lists of items around, and it just didn't really flow off the tongue or it flow off the page in any way. It was just very tedious and hard work to get through. Not only that, I really thought that she kind of went too far in details of every part of his youth when he was living with his father, especially in the drugs and all that. I just thought that it really wasn't handled well. I would have loved if she had just focused on his adult life when he was in the underground art world, and then maybe did flashbacks to what happened with his mother, and then living with his father and the Barbers. I would have liked it a little bit better like that, just because it would have flowed more smoothly, and it wouldn't have felt like she was taking forever to get to the actual story, because I had assumed, especially from the synopsis, that we were going to be getting mostly about the art and the painting that affected Theo so much, and we really wasn't getting that at all. As I said, this was a tedious bit of reading, and I only was able to give it 2 stars. I do feel like Donna Tartt is a good writer. It's just the style that she chose for this book, and I'm really hoping that she doesn't use the same style in her other books, because I do have another book of hers and I do plan to read it. The next book that I finished is Night Train to Lisbon by Pascal Mercier. The author is a professor of philosophy, and you can definitely see that through this book. This is a story about Raymond Dargers, who teaches classical languages at a Swiss high school, I believe and he kind of lives a very routine life, never really sees what his life is really like, and kind of just lives as it goes, never really doing anything new or different or exciting. And then one day he encounters a Portuguese woman, which leads him to a book that he becomes obsessed with the author, which leads him to visit Lisbon, where the author used to live. Ideas that Pascal Mercier explores through Kugura was very interesting. The idea of just going by life without really living, and finding and in that moment when you realize it and how you react to it was very interesting, especially with the parts that he reads of Prado's journal, if you want to call it that, and it was very interesting, but the story itself wasn't really all that believable. There were parts that just kind of came off very strange and just, as I said, not quite believable. Also, there were some grammar and miswordings that I found throughout, and it just didn't really seem like it was the greatest translation. But I did really actually like the style. There was a lot of very quotable stuff being said throughout. It's just that it's pretty dry. It is a bit tedious to work through, especially if you aren't really into philosophy. And so, although it was interesting, it really wasn't as great as I was hoping it to be. So I gave this one 3 stars. Now on to the books that I will be starting to read. The book that I'll be reading off my own TBR is The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. Day 2 in the Kingkiller Chronicles. If you watched my March wrap-up, you'll know that I did get 50% through with this at the end of March, but I ended up putting it down. So I was really getting tired with the story, especially because of the whole romance between Kvothe and Denna, which I really didn't have any investment in. I don't care for it. I was really hoping that we wouldn't be seeing any more of Donna in this one, and instead we keep getting more of her. Also, she acts like she's this really mysterious person, but she's really not all that mysterious at all. I also can't understand the relationship or why it's so necessary to the story. I want magic, I want wizardry, and I just want adventure, and that's what I thought I was going to get from these two books, and the first book was a little bit more adventurous and exciting than this one was for the first 50% of the book. Also, for the first 50% of this book, it feels very much like a continuation of the same plot that was happening in The Name of the Wind. And I was expecting for the plot to have moved forward a little bit to something different, and instead I was getting a lot of the same thing. Then we have Kvothe, who I actually found quite annoying in this one. I had decided to start it in May, which I am. I really don't know how I am going to get through this book because I still have those same issues. It's still there in my head, but I do want to try to finish it because I paid good money for it. I will also be reading The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde this week. This is, of course, by Robert Louis Stevenson. I am only reading Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde because that is what I picked this up for. I've been wanting to read that story for years, and I finally was able to find it at my library, and it just kind of came to me, so I am very excited and looking forward to reading the actual story and learning what it's all about. That is all that I read in the past week and what I will be reading. Tell me down below if you've read any of these and what you thought of them. Also, I would love to hear what you've been reading this past week. Thank you all so much for watching, and keep smiling.